Technocracy is projection. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of folks who are looking at the current trends of society with respect to what they think people are trying to achieve. And I see a very common theme of people thinking that, we're headed into a technocracy, a world which is ruled through or predominantly by technology, which it makes sense. I mean, we see the power of the handheld devices that we have, the tablets, the phones, the kinds of information that can be collected and gathered, and judgments made about us based on those kinds of pieces of data and whatnot. But if we look historically at what kinds of civilizations humans have built, what we notice is that the ones that are the most advanced are the ones where people have the most freedom. The ones where people can make different choices and there's no real penalty for it beyond the natural consequences of the choices that those people are making. What we're seeing right now, the concerns are that choices are going to be limited, not by circumstance either, but by people. That there are going to be oppressive overlords of some sort or another, that there's going to be controls put in place on what people can or can't do, what they can or can't say, where they can or can't go, who they can or can't associate with. And if we sort of project that out with our own convictions, the people who are not of that mindset to try and set up a system like that, it's easy to say, oh, well, if I were a tyrant or an autocrat or something of that sort, and I wanted to set up a system that would be something I thought was great, then that would be a technocracy. Like, that's the quote-unquote evil empire that somebody who values those things would want to set up, in that it's not about just a simple assertion of power over people. It's also about a power over more material things, about power over science and technology, power over as many things as possible. But what we see again throughout history is that in societies where few ruled and ruled through power, the simpler the society was, the more stable everything was. When people have knowledge, when people have power, they can threaten the structure of that power. And so what I think a lot of people are missing out on is that what is going to be set up if we do have that sort of tyrannical dictatorship or whatever, it's not going to be a complicated system. It's not going to have a bunch of AI and data and all that kind of stuff. Those are the smoke and mirrors to keep everybody busy right now. That's what's keeping everybody's imagination running on high speed. I've got children, and I know that we can imagine things that are more glorious than we will ever experience in our lives, and we can also imagine things that are more terrifying than we can possibly experience in our lives as well. When one of my kids wakes up from a night terror or a nightmare or that kind of thing, their imaginations don't restrict what they think is real. And so I see a lot of people's own imaginations running wild with respect to technology, with respect to the direction that society is going to go. Is it possible that we'll have some sort of dystopian future? Yeah, it's not impossible, but I think when we see that those stories play out, time and again what we see is that one of the traits is that there's still ways for people to fall through the cracks. There's still ways for people to exploit the technology for their own use and not come under the thumb of the powers that be. Sometimes people can fall under them randomly or by chance or by circumstances as the stories require. But more often than not, there's this sort of tacit admission that the powers that be don't really have as much control as they would prefer, and that the complexity of the technology involved is a large part of that. So projection is a psychological phenomenon. I've already been talking about all this stuff, but projection is where you take what you believe, what you understand, what you know, and you apply it outside of yourself to a setting, to a circumstance, to a people. And then you try and make sense of what those people are saying or doing or what's going on in the circumstance as if you were the primary force behind it. And what ends up happening is that people don't fundamentally understand things because they would not have been in that circumstance. They wouldn't have made the choices that were made. And so their own understanding of things doesn't provide a reliable predictive mechanism as to how things would play out. And so there ends up being this disparity where people think, oh, well, if such and such people were in such and such circumstance, then, this is how I would have reacted. And so in order for me to prepare for a potential future, I have to imagine how other people were going to act, but I am going to use my own template, my own behavioral template as what I'm going to use for everybody else. So if I were the autocrat, if I were the dictator, if I were the protester, if I were this, if I were that, how would I act? How would I behave? And so people are making terrible predictions on how to prepare for the future. People are making terrible predictions on what the future is going to look like because they think that their motivations, their priorities, their capacities are going to be what determines the future. It's not. And I don't know what it is because it's really hard to stop projecting once you've started doing it. It's really hard to get yourself out of the picture, to look at it objectively, or as objectively as possible, to really figure out what the future holds. Because right now, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody really knows. I think there are a ton of competing plans. There are lots of people that are trying stuff, but none of it's set in stone. None of the plans that men have been making, or women, I guess, if you want to be equal. Nobody's plans are certain, are guaranteed to work out. So instead of preparing for one potential future, we need to prepare for more. And the more futures you try and prepare for, the less specific any of your preparations are going to be. The less it's going to be, oh, I need to have this tool or this skill set. And more it's going to be, how do I adapt to changing circumstances? How do I stay cool when everything is going chaotic around me? That's going to be how you prepare. That's going to be how you are ready to deal with whatever comes your way. Not because you have the skill set, not because you've already predicted where things are going to happen. There's no X on the ground for the roadrunner to find. It's about adaptability. It's about being able to adjust, being able to learn, having curiosity, and knowing that what you think is going to be is most likely not going to be at all, and being okay with that. Being okay with not being able to predict the future, being okay with not being able to know for sure what's going to happen, but knowing what you are, knowing who you are, and what you're capable of, and being ready to act at a moment's notice. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye-bye. God bless.